Hello and welcome to another episode of At the Edge of It All. Joining us today is Dr. Erik Fritsvold. He is the Academic Director of USD's Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership Program. Thanks so much for being with us.
Elena, thanks so much for having me. Excited for the conversation here.
Great. And we're going to dive into all of your background and the work that you do with law enforcement. But before we get started in that, I'd love to learn just how you got interested in this area of expertise and what that looks like day to day.
Sure. I'm a nerdy academic criminologist by training, so taught undergrads under the sociology and criminology umbrella here for a decade and a half, and had the opportunity to spearhead something unique, different, and challenging for the university, which was our second online degree in our university's history. Come from a blue-collar background, combine that with criminology, and someone thought I'd be a good fit to serve in this role. And I think what's rewarding and most exciting about it, if you don't mind, is that I'd argue I think you get into academia and law enforcement for many of the same reasons, that we're mission-driven, and you want a career that's meaningful and makes a positive impact on the world around you and on people. And I've learned that while our jobs are very different, I think the mission unites us between academia and law enforcement. And if you want to meet people who are making a real difference in the lives of our community every day, it's our women and men in law enforcement, to be sure.
Yeah, and with your work, because you're working with leaders in law enforcement, training them, coaching them, leveling them up a little bit in their careers, right? And so what have you found, and I'm sure anybody could have a different answer for this,
Sure.
but what makes a solid leader in law enforcement?
Wow.
What are some of those traits? And I'm sure this is a question that is very opinionated, right? But
Sure.
what would you say are some of the traits that stand out?
Well, I can share an aha moment for me as an outsider looking into this profession. What I'm struck with, whether it's your everyday community-facing law enforcement professional, but also in managers and leaders, is the striking diversity of the skill set that's necessary to be successful. So any law enforcement leader grew up in an environment where, like I think you and I wake up in the morning, we have a pretty good idea of what our day is going to entail. Mm-hmm. Our women and men in law enforcement, they wake up and they're going to be a social worker for 2 hours. They're going to respond to a life and death emergency. They're going to be a pseudo-medical professional on the front lines of like a drug overdose. They're going to be involved in a youth mentoring program. And then they're going to come back and manage people. And it's just that sheer diversity of the skill set that is probably the most striking thing for me. But then to unpack that and how does that apply to leadership? Not only do you need all those industry skills and that diversity of industry skills, you also need all the people-centric, human-centric, emotional intelligence, management, and leadership skills that are proven across industries. So it's amazing. You need that technical expertise plus the leadership acumen to be successful in frankly, a very demanding profession.
Yeah, no, it's true. Every day is different, and that is no more than true for someone in law enforcement for sure. Now, just as background on our American law enforcement here, I think when we think of a police department, we probably think that here in the States, they're all probably the same. They run the same. It's the same kind of, wherever city you're in, they sort of operate all the same. It's a cut and paste, right, across the country. But is that the case? Is that what we see if we see a law enforcement officer in San Diego? Are they following the same kind of rules, regulations, and policies as someone in Arkansas, for example?
That's a great question. I think the mission unites law enforcement across the country, but the way that's operationalized and the way agencies are structured are tremendously diverse. So there are over 18,000 individual law enforcement organizations across the U.S. just at the local level, not even thinking about three-letter federal agencies. Of those 18,000, more than half have 25 or fewer personnel. So one of the great things about our master's degree program is we get to have a dialogue between someone who works for the 10,000 person Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department or someone who is one of two officers in rural Pennsylvania. Wow. And how the issues of the day impact them. And to further extrapolate from that a little bit, Elena, there are no codified national standards in policing. So that creates a responsiveness to the local community that I think is laudable.
But why is that? Is it just that's just the way it is, or is there some kind of reason behind that?
I'm going to give you the classic academic theoretical answer here, Elena. Some argued, like the founding theorist Robert Peel said something like the community are the police and the police are the community, or the people are the police and the police are the people. So the argument is that who is going to best co-create public safety with their community? Those are going to be police who grew up in those communities, who know the key stakeholders, know the dynamics, know the norms and cultural expectations. And so policing is a local function. And I think that's the theory that makes it interesting.
Okay. And you were kind of telling me a little bit about, before I asked that, just how they're so different, right? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. Just looking at from a leadership development standpoint, one of the big calls in modern law enforcement is transparent succession planning, transparent promotional processes, which is a heck of a lot easier to implement in a large organization where you can dedicate an arm of personnel to establish a promotional readiness division. And then you have smaller departments that just have to do it ad hoc, and good mentoring is kind of done by happenstance. And so the ability to make things more systematic for the overall health and development of your organization can vary pretty wildly.
But one thing that is common across the board, I think, and you could touch on this, is we see a lot in the news of that there is staffing shortages, right? You'll see the billboard, join your local law enforcement, and we're hearing that the numbers are low. Is that true across the board for what we're seeing nationally? And then also, what are we seeing here locally in San Diego?
Absolutely is my answer. I'd respectfully argue that the number one most longstanding, consistent, and significant challenge facing law enforcement is staffing. Simultaneously, society is asking more and more of our law enforcement professionals. I mean, here locally, co-responding to people in mental health crisis, being part of the service providing lexicon for the unhoused. Again, they're on the front lines of the fentanyl epidemic and are pseudo-medical practitioners delivering, agents that can reverse overdoses. We are asking more and more of America's police. And simultaneously, they're understaffed, some agencies to the point of it being at an absolutely critical level. Some stats, large police departments, Philadelphia PD, LAPD, some data suggests they're down 1,000 officers. San Diego Police Department, I believe the hard count is they're down about 450, but our chief is on record saying they need 1,000 more personnel to adequately serve the community. And it's not just women and men in uniform who wear the badge. That staffing shortage applies to professional staff as well. Dispatchers, forensic scientists, my nerdy equivalent in a police department, a crime analyst who does the data and evidence-based policing that is a hallmark of modern policing. So we should be really proud that law enforcement is doing the high-quality job they're doing, while being asked to do more and more with less and less.
And what is the reason for this shortage? Is this a recent change that we've seen more shortages, or has this been going on for a decade or more, or what is sort of the numbers behind that?
I get the strong sense it's been going on for more than a decade. The largely anecdotal evidence I would marshal to support that, Elena, is we did 2 years of research with the local law enforcement community to help build our master's degree programs. That started in 2013. And we asked about challenges and how the university could marshal our resources to best be of service. The single most consistent response, and the one that we got most vigorously, was staffing, recruitment, and retention. And what's really compelling about that challenge, what's the why? Some people say it might be part of the national narrative that historically is sometimes quite critical of police. Some people say it's about changing generational dynamics. It's hard to unpack the source exactly, but I think many, like myself, were cautiously optimistic about the future. And I think law enforcement is doing a better job communicating just the diversity of ways people can be involved with policing.
Yeah, it's true. Because when you see those billboards of like, we need more law enforcement, we need more officers, more sheriff's deputies,
Yeah.
You may think of the one wearing the uniform, but it can be a lot of the behind the scene work too. Like you said,
right.
that could be enjoyable for a lot of people as well, that you're still serving the purpose, but not necessarily, out in patrol cars or doing that sort of work, right?
Absolutely. We do a unit of my master's program about what's colloquially referred to as action movie police recruiting, that a decade and a half ago, you would see someone rappelling out of a helicopter as it exploded as your, ad to become a police department person. But today's law enforcement professional is, again, they're in schools mentoring youth. They're part of the police athletic league. They're crunching numbers and managing budgets. They're leading others, or they're hosting trainings on emotional intelligence. It's a much more diverse and inclusive profession than I think that action movie narrative suggests.
Yeah, no, that's good to point out. As part of the program that you're in, this master's program that is training our law enforcement and leadership, why is it important for leaders to consider a master's program or another program? And what have been the benefits of doing it? I'm sure you get the benefit of doing it yourself, right? Which is always great, and learning is always important. But when you look at the numbers and the data, what is important when law enforcement go back to school, for example, and get a master's, like is the program here? How does that help them in the long run?
Sure. There's a pragmatic answer and a skill set answer, and they're not mutually exclusive here. Master's degree is the industry standard for promotion in law enforcement. So that's becoming more and more clear, especially in certain states like California. It's going to be rare to see someone at the top of the pyramid in their organization that does not have a master's degree. But in terms of skill set development, the evidence is compelling. Now, admittedly, these are correlations, not causations, but a higher educated officer is less likely to use their firearm in the course of their career. A more educated officer is less likely to get community complaints, less likely to use force over the course of their career, more likely to be promoted, and interestingly, are proven better communicators, not only your written work, which you would expect, but also cross-cultural communication and communication through the lens of leadership. So again, those are correlations, not causations, but the impact of education is quite pronounced in the research. But there's a super important caveat that we have to talk about, and that's it has to be high quality education that meets law enforcement professionals where they are. And I'm going to be the first to admit academia underserved the law enforcement community for the better part of 3/4 of a century. And some of the academic institutions that were involved in early law enforcement education were, and I'll phrase this as kindly as I can, maybe less reputable, had really low graduation rates, were pretty happy to take tuition dollars and care a little less about the outcome. So I'm so proud that the University of San Diego indulged us to get involved in high quality education that are going to lead to those tangible benefits, not just a checkbox on a piece of paper.
And as the director of this program, prior to this program being around, you kind of touched on it, but there must have been a big need for it, because you're saying that law leaders aren't moving up if they don't have a master's degree, right? So you could have 20 years in the service, and maybe you're passed up for someone that has a degree, it seems, today. So how big of a need was there to have a program like this to create leaders in law enforcement? And also, I think in your career, to be a leader, it does take a little bit of practice, I guess, and also a little bit of learning new tools to be a better leader. And so what was the need, and how does this program sort of fulfill that?
Sure. Well, there was evidence about the need for more robust and systematic leadership training because our program was the idea of local law enforcement. Like, I wish I could sit here and take credit, but that'd be disingenuous. It was the San Diego Police Officers Association, then President Brian Marvel, who had relationships here at the university, saw that the officers coming up through the police department, that having some independent, supplementary, highly agile and effective training through the lens of academia would serve the profession and our communities well. So we knew there was a demand because we were told there was a demand. So the goal of our program is to mimic and practice skills and tools that people are going to use on the job every day. So our mantra is learn it on a Monday, use it on a Tuesday. So for example, we do a unit on officer wellness, and actually the statistics about PTSD and cumulative stress in the law enforcement profession is maybe something we should talk about. But there are agencies that are doing cutting-edge pioneering work to take care of their people, some right here in San Diego County. And so our master's degree, thinking about leadership development, I would argue no effective leader in modern law enforcement is going to be successful unless they have a sense of the stress and wellness needs of their people and proven evidence-based programming that can help. And so in our unit, we don't just bestow information about officer and organizational wellness. Their assignment is to research and write a memo to a superior at work that highlights best practices for organizational wellness and pitches, including budget and personnel and cost and opportunity costs, pitches a new wellness program to a superior at work. So when you're tasked with something new as an emerging leader in law enforcement, our goal is, let's have you come to the university, practice some of those skills, get professional coaching and feedback from our faculty in a pretty low stakes environment. And then when you do it in the real world, you'll be proven and you know exactly what to do.
What are some of the things that you hear from the folks in law enforcement that you work with? What are some of the challenges that you're hearing? I mean, you're getting a face-to-face with some of our law enforcement, and so you're able to, I imagine, to kind of shift the way you teach things or the subjects you might be bringing into the classroom. What are some of the struggles they're dealing with? What are some of the wins? What are they telling you?
Sure. And our Division of Professional and Continuing Education, we should be really proud. People say the public safety professions move fast. My goodness. And trying to develop a curriculum that keeps pace with such a fast-moving profession is really, really challenging. So what are folks telling us about emerging needs? Definitely technology. How to co-create technology that's going to not only help policing, but also be done in a way that's sensitive and responsive to, and again, collaborative with your community. And different communities have different expectations. So new technology in part to address some of those staffing shortages, but how do you roll that out, implement, and oversee it in a way that's responsive to what your community expects? We're also being told a lot about officer and organizational wellness, as I mentioned, and some data to support that. In our lifetime, just as a regular person in American society, on average, we're going to see 2 highly traumatic events in our lifetime. Your average law enforcement professional, 188. Wow. They're going to experience 90 times the trauma that you and I are.
I imagine, yeah.
And so you couple that with being understaffed and not sleeping enough and having an inherently stressful job and 188 traumas. And keep in mind, doubles a lot, right? Triples a lot. 90 times the trauma. If your leadership and your organizations aren't taking good care of you, I mean, that's just not a sustainable situation. So people are talking a lot about technology, a lot about staffing, a lot about organizational wellness. And we also cover some mundane stuff too, like budgeting best practices and some more technical skills as well.
Yeah. And so what do you see needs to happen? You've been saying for more than a decade, probably there's been staffing shortages, right? Which means that's been a burden on law enforcement. You're talking about mental wellness. What are some things that you think needs to change, or what has been the root issue, and how do we sort of fix it to provide more staffing to get, it seems there needs to be more people to help, which relieves a little bit of the tension of having to do more. So I guess recruitment, how do you see getting that fixed at least, or encouraging more people to join?
That's a great question. And it's quite literally like the pivot point for modern public safety. Recruitment and retention best practices is a tough thing to unwrap. Some experts argue that every single officer needs to be a recruiter every single day, and that they need to view every interaction with the community as an opportunity to show someone the great work that can be done in law enforcement and just how helpful you can be and make a big difference in people's lives. So law enforcement not only needs to recruit every day, I'd argue they have to tell their story again about the diversity of ways that you can work in public safety. It's not just rappelling from helicopters. It's this tremendously diverse human skill set. But I'd argue, and I think this is going to be characteristic of the next decade of law enforcement, that mental health and homelessness gives us empirically proven models for co-creating public safety with the community. So we know these are social problems that I would argue should have been solved elsewhere. Policing is an institution of last resort. But now, thank goodness, police often have the opportunity to co-respond to people in mental health crisis, for example, with licensed clinicians who have gone through special training to ride with police. Police can be part of a collaborative interdisciplinary team responding to a problem with an unhoused encampment, for example, that has social services there, that has medical providers there. And so, public safety is a team sport. And so it's in large part about police staffing, but it's also about, can we think creatively in ways to create these interdisciplinary teams when it's appropriate to do so and when the evidence and outcomes bear it out, to solve social problems collaboratively and not put everything on the shoulders of the police department.
Yeah. And so in the work that you do today, how do you see policing evolving? What do you see looking ahead as to how some of what you shared becomes more of a reality, or what are your thoughts on how you can see it evolving over the next decade?
Absolutely. Technology, as mentioned, is going to increasingly become a part of the day-to-day lives of progressive modern law enforcement. The future of policing is definitely going to be characterized by more collaborative models with the community. So I know many states, like many agencies here in California, have chiefs advisory boards and citizens advisory boards and boards that help inform and oversee the rollout of new technology. I think it's going to be about preemptive and proactive engagement with your community. And it's also going to be about these co-responder models. And you can see how those themes intertwine in a pretty powerful way. So as we ask more and more of our law enforcement professionals, I do think I'm cautiously optimistic about staffing. But again, it's also about different sectors of society doing collaborative work to both prevent and respond to those social problems.
Yeah. Well, this was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of our folks at home did as well. So Dr. Fritsvold, thanks so much for being with us today.
Elena, thanks so much for having me, and kudos for running just a cutting edge podcast and broadcasting all the fantastic work happening here at the University of San Diego.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to catch our next one.